There are games we believe we're playing yet. In truth, it is the game that's playing us. They don't live inside consoles or on screens. They live in the mind. They whisper in every advertisement, every competition, every mirror we stare into when we judge ourselves. They are invisible programs, quietly training the heart long before the hand ever touches a controller. People say video games teach children violence, but look closer. Who taught adults deceit? Who trained the powerful in manipulation? Who taught nations to compete until compassion became weak? The truth is, the world itself has become a colossal simulation, a theater of reward and punishment, a scoreboard of fame and fortune. And the controller isn't in our hands, it's wired to our desires. Imagine a child born into this shimmering world of noise. At first, it's all color, movement, and wonder. Life looks like a grand adventure with simple rules. Obey, achieve, receive your prize. But as the child grows, the screen begins to flicker. They see the cheaters winning, the kind ones losing, and the lines between right and wrong start to blur. That is the moment the awakening begins, the realization that the game is not what it seems. There are 6 games humanity keeps replaying, 6 programs of the soul that shape how we think, desire, and destroy. They promise freedom but deliver addiction. They offer victory but breed emptiness. They teach us to succeed but never to question what success really means. They harden the heart while flattering the ego. They make the mind sharper but the spirit smaller. We call this progress. We call this civilization. But in truth, it is the most seductive form of violence ever designed, the violence of distraction. Violence is not always blood or bullets. It can be a smile that hides contempt, a post meant to humiliate, a quiet resentment that poisons dinner tables. It's the casual cruelty of comparison, the cold silence of pride, the way we scroll through others' lives and punish ourselves for not being them. Violence is the war inside the mind that no one can see, but everyone feels. And yet this is not a sermon against games. Life itself is a game, a divine simulation, filled with missions, challenges, and unseen levels. The goal is not to quit, but to awaken, to realize you were never just a player. You were the programmer all along. The wise don't reject the game. They master its rules. They don't blame the chaos outside. They confront the darkness within. For the outer world is nothing more than an echo of the inner one. Some spend their lives conquering, yet never learn peace. Others lose everything, yet find serenity. Many think they're leveling up, when in truth they're only moving deeper into illusion, collecting trophies that can't follow them beyond the screen. And when the final light fades, when the console of existence powers down, the soul will ask, was I truly alive, or merely well trained? We ask, how can I be more positive? How can I be richer? But the real question is, who am I becoming in the process? Modern society teaches you how to earn, not why to give. It teaches you how to win, not how to understand. It trains confidence but neglects humility. It rewards attention but starves authenticity. We call it progress, but it's only another level of the same illusion, another mission inside a digital labyrinth where the soul forgets itself. C.S. Lewis once said, "You don't have a soul. You are a soul. You have a body." If that's true, then every time we hate, envy, or despair, it's not the world teaching us violence. It's us teaching the world how to reflect it back. So let us begin. Step into the 6 invisible games, the 6 illusions that have turned our species into machines that react instead of souls that reflect. Don't be afraid. Every game has an exit. Every illusion hides a door. And at the end of each, there is always the same revelation. The greatest act of violence is not what we do to each other, it is what we allow the world to do to our mind. When you understand that, every game dissolves. The first game begins the moment a child opens their eyes. Before they can even speak, they start learning who they are by watching who they are not. A baby reaches for another's toy. A student measures their worth by another's grades. An adult scrolls through the endless parade of digital perfection, each image, each success story, a mirror reflecting not truth, but lack. This is the game of comparison, and it has no winners, only exhausted players. Comparison is a silent kind of violence. It doesn't spill blood, it drains the soul. It's the quiet corrosion of joy, the invisible theft of gratitude. The world feeds it to us like sugar, sweet at first, then toxic in silence. We call it ambition. But often it is envy disguised as progress. You wake up, open your phone, and see someone living a better life. At least it looks that way. They travel farther, smile brighter, succeed faster, and before you can stop it, you begin the calculation. Why not me? What's wrong with me? The moment that thought enters, the game begins. You are no longer living your story. You are trapped inside someone else's. You become a shadow, chasing another shadow, running through a maze designed to keep you hungry but never full. This game doesn't need controllers or scores. It only needs one thing: your attention. It rewards you with validation, punishes you with inadequacy, and keeps you replaying the same level over and over, hoping that one day you'll be enough to win. But you never win, because the system isn't built for victory. It's built for addiction. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man." That is the algorithm of comparison. It's cruel mathematics. You don't crave joy itself. You crave advantage. And in craving advantage, you lose what makes joy possible. Look around you. Every advertisement, every influencer, every voice whispering more, better, faster, they all profit from your discontent. They need you to feel small so they can sell you something to make you feel bigger. It is a perfect machine, a cycle of envy fueling consumption, consumption fueling emptiness, emptiness fueling more envy, a world running endlessly on emotional electricity drained from the human spirit. But here is the truth that breaks the spell. There is no real competition. You were born with fingerprints that have never existed before and will never exist again. No one can steal your lane because your lane is not on the map. The illusion of comparison only works when you forget who you are. Think about it. A rose doesn't envy the oak. The sun doesn't compete with the moon. Each fulfills its purpose without apology. Only human beings, creatures of divine imagination, look at another soul and say, "I must be more than you, or I am nothing." And in that moment, we betray the heaven that shaped us. The violence of comparison is not visible, but it leaves scars. It makes you despise what you already have. It turns gratitude into scarcity, friendship into rivalry, love into transaction. You stop seeing people as souls and start seeing them as benchmarks. You stop learning from others and start measuring against them. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you forget how to celebrate because someone else is always celebrating louder. You cannot heal in a world obsessed with ranking. You cannot feel peace when you are constantly being scored. The only way to end this game is to lay down the controller, to walk away from the scoreboard, and return to your own garden. There, in the quiet soil of self-honesty, you begin to see you were never losing. You were only looking in the wrong direction. The only true comparison is between who you were yesterday and who you are today. All other games are illusions. built to keep you distracted from the only battle that matters, the one between your potential and your fear. When you stop comparing, you don't become less ambitious. You become more precise. You no longer chase everything, you build something eternal. You no longer burn with jealousy, you shine with purpose. The noise of envy fades, and what remains is clarity. You understand that to win is not to have more than others, but to have mastery over yourself. And when that realization dawns, the first game dissolves. The violence ends not because the world became kinder, but because you did. The second game is older than history itself. It began the first time a human being clenched their fists and said, "This must be mine." It's the game of control, the game of trying to force life to obey our will. Every tyrant plays it. Every anxious mind plays it. Every person who cannot sleep because the world refuses to stay still is playing it right now. Control is the most sophisticated illusion of all. It makes you feel safe while quietly draining your peace. It promises certainty, but delivers anxiety. It tells you, if you could just fix everything, everyone, and yourself, then finally you could rest. But rest never comes, because the world will not kneel to your command, and deep down your spirit knows it. Fear is the engine that powers this game. It is the fear of losing what you think you own, your reputation, your plans, your comfort, your version of the future. So you tighten your grip, believing that strength is found in control. But the tighter you hold, the more life slips through your fingers. Because life is not meant to be held. It is meant to be honored. Every empire in history fell because of this delusion. Kings built fortresses, nations hoarded weapons, leaders demanded obedience, all in the name of control. Yet every fortress decayed, every law crumbled, every ruler met the same silence in the end. The lesson was written in the dust of centuries. What you try to own will eventually own you. Even on the smallest scale, we do the same. We try to control our partners, our children, our co-workers, our circumstances. We try to script conversations before they happen, to force outcomes, to micromanage destiny. And when it doesn't bend to our will, we suffer not because life is cruel, but because we are unwilling to dance with its unpredictability. C.S. Lewis once wrote that, "The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men." In that paradox lies the secret. Life's resistance, its refusal to be tamed, is not punishment, it is mercy. It breaks the illusion that you are the master of everything and invites you to become the steward of something far greater. Control feeds the ego, surrender feeds the soul, and yet surrender is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength, the courage to trust that even when things fall apart, you will not. The courage to let go of outcomes and still give your best. The courage to walk into uncertainty with open hands, not clenched fists. Fear is always whispering that you are not safe. But ask yourself, has fear ever kept you safe? Or has it only kept you small? The truth is that fear doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. It builds invisible walls around your potential. It convinces you that to be careful is to be alive. But caution without courage is just another form of death. Control may feel like power, but it's the power of a cage. Freedom, on the other hand, is the power to live without demanding guarantee. The one who can act boldly without assurance, who can love without expectation, who can walk through chaos and remain kind, that is the one who has mastered the game. The violence of fear is subtle. It doesn't scream, it calculates. It controls not with fists, but with thoughts. It's the trembling need to predict, to manipulate, to force others into the shape of your comfort. It's the spiritual violence of refusing to let life breathe. And when you refuse to let life breathe, you suffocate your own soul first. Let go. Not in laziness, but in faith. Not in apathy, but in understanding. Because when you finally release your need to dominate, you will feel something extraordinary, the pulse of existence itself, steady and alive, not against you, but with you. You will discover that control was never the goal. Alignment was. You cannot control the waves, but you can learn to sail. You cannot command the wind, but you can open your sails. You cannot force others to love you, but you can love in such a way that they remember what love feels like. That is the quiet victory that ends this game. When fear dissolves, control loses its purpose. And in that stillness, you discover a strange new strength, not the power to rule the world, but the grace to walk through it unbroken. And that is when the second game fades to silence. The third game begins quietly with a sound so constant, so familiar, that you no longer notice it. It hums through every conversation, every notification, every song that plays not for joy, but for avoidance. It's the sound of distraction, the modern lullaby that keeps humanity asleep. Noise has become our refuge, silence our enemy. We wake to alarms, not mornings. We check messages before we check on our souls. We fear being alone with our thoughts, because in that stillness we might meet ourselves, and that encounter terrifies us more than any war. So we stay busy. We scroll, we click, we consume, we drown in information and call it wisdom. We are entertained to death. C.S. Lewis once imagined a world where demons rejoice not in grand evils, but in small distractions. He wrote, "It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out." That is the architecture of this game. It doesn't need to corrupt you. It only needs to keep you busy. It doesn't have to steal your purpose. It only has to divide it into 1,000 fragments until you forget there ever was one. We live in the age of infinite noise. Every second, someone wants your attention. Every platform, every product, every voice is fighting to colonize your focus. You think you are choosing what to see, but most of the time, it is choosing you. Algorithms whisper, "Stay a little longer." Advertisements murmur, "You're almost enough." And your mind, exhausted but addicted, obeys. The tragedy is not that we are distracted, it's that we are comfortable being distracted. We confuse stimulation for meaning, movement for progress, opinions for truth. We've built a culture that celebrates being loud but forgets how to be deep. Noise is not just external. It lives inside too, the endless chatter of self-doubt, replayed arguments, imagined futures. It's the constant buzzing that says, you should be doing more. Even when you rest, it whispers that you're falling behind. That whisper is the modern whip. It drives millions forward, but never allows one to arrive. Distraction is a form of violence because it kills without pain. It doesn't stab, it dissolves. It robs the mind of presence, the heart of wonder, the soul of prayer. It turns sacred moments into background noise. It steals our ability to listen to the voice of conscience, that quiet, trembling guidance that only speaks when the world goes silent. You can't hear wisdom in chaos. You can't hear love over noise. The world will not stop shouting. You must learn to listen beneath it. There is a silence, deeper than quiet, a sacred stillness, where life begins again. It is not the absence of sound, but the absence of distraction. It's the moment when you close your eyes, breathe, and remember that you are not your notifications, you are not your productivity, you are not the noise, you are the awareness that hears it all. To master this game is to reclaim your attention, because attention is the most sacred form of currency you possess. Whatever you give it to becomes your God. If you give it to fear, you worship anxiety. If you give it to envy, you worship emptiness. But if you give it to truth, you awaken. So turn off the noise, not just the devices, but the internal commentary that tells you who to be. Walk outside and let the world speak without word. Let the trees, the wind, the slow rhythm of breath remind you that existence has never needed your permission to be beautiful. The universe has been humming a quieter song all along. When you listen long enough, something changes. The noise loses its power. The silence stops being frightening and becomes sacred. You begin to hear your own heartbeat again, the original rhythm that the world tried to drown. That is the sound of awakening. That is the moment the third game ends. Desire is the most sophisticated of all the games. It wears the mask of meaning, but behind it lies a hunger that can never be filled. It begins innocently, a dream, a goal, a small spark of wanting. But soon the spark becomes a flame, and the flame becomes a wildfire that devours peace itself. Modern life thrives on this fire. It teaches you to chase, not to find, but to chase, to always need more. More comfort, more money, more validation, more control, more experience. The word enough has been deleted from our vocabulary. We build skyscrapers that reach the clouds, but hearts that never touch the sky. We worship ambition, but forget fulfillment. Desire tells you you are incomplete until you achieve this. And every time you reach this, it moves the goalpost. It is a horizon that retreats as you walk toward it, the illusion of progress without arrival. You get what you wanted, and for a brief shimmering second you feel alive. Then the silence returns, and the hunger whispers again. We confuse desire with purpose, but they are not the same. Purpose grows from the soul. Desire grows from the wound. Purpose builds. Desire consumes. Purpose flows outward, serving others. Desire folds inward, devouring itself. When your wanting is rooted in lack, every victory will feel like loss. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. That is the secret truth modernity refuses to teach. Your deepest desires are not for things, they are for wholeness. What you call success is often a cry for belonging. What you call pleasure is a longing for peace. What you call wealth is a desperate search for worth. This game is not limited to luxury or greed. It plays out in every heart that cannot rest. The artist who can't stop perfecting, the lover who can't stop needing, the worker who can't stop climbing, the consumer who can't stop scrolling. All of them are running on the same loop. Maybe the next thing will complete me, but it never does. Because completion is not something you find, it is something you remember. The violence of endless wanting is not visible like war, but it wounds the soul just as deeply. It makes you treat life like a marketplace, relationships like transactions, and even God like a vending machine. You start praying for blessings not because you are grateful, but because you are bargaining. You begin to measure people by how much they feed your hunger. And when they don't, you discard them, calling it self-growth. Desire enslaves the spirit by convincing it that joy lives in the future. It turns time into a treadmill. You run faster but never move. You look at your reflection and see potential, but not peace. You see ambition, but not rest. You see movement, but not direction. That is the quiet violence of want. It makes you alive, but never content. There's nothing wrong with desire itself. Fire is not evil. It is sacred when contained. It can forge, create, illuminate, but when untamed, it burns everything you love. The difference lies in who controls it. Does your desire serve you, or do you serve it? Does it elevate your spirit, or consume it? When you finally see this, a strange clarity appears. You begin to understand that true wealth is not possession. It is freedom from the need to possess. True pleasure is not escape, it is presence. True ambition is not to gain the world, it is to lose the fear of losing it. And that is when the game begins to crumble. When you stop chasing and start creating, when you stop craving and start cultivating, when you stop begging life for meaning and start giving it meaning, desire is not your enemy, but when you kneel before it, you become its prisoner. Stand up and it becomes your teacher. When the heart learns to desire rightly, not for vanity, but for virtue, not for glory, but for grace, the hunger transforms. It no longer devours you, it drives you. It no longer burns you, it warms you. And in that quiet transformation, the fourth game ends not in exhaustion, but in awakening. The fifth game begins the moment you stop questioning and start defending. It is the point where conviction becomes armor and truth becomes territory. It is played in churches and schools, in politics and science, in families and on social media. It's not about faith or wisdom. It's about ownership of ideas. It is the game of belief. Belief by itself is beautiful. It gives shape to chaos, meaning to mystery. It anchors the soul in storms. But when belief becomes possession, it transforms into violence, because whatever you cling to as absolute, you will eventually use to judge, to divide, to dominate. The mind that says, I know, stops listening. And the moment you stop listening, you stop growing. C.S. Lewis once wrote, when the whole world is running towards a cliff, he who is running the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind. That is the danger of collective belief. The crowd convinces you that agreement is enlightenment, that loudness is truth, that comfort is faith. But truth is rarely comfortable, and faith is rarely loud. The violence of blind belief doesn't wear armor. It wears certainty. It kills curiosity first, then compassion. It tells you they are wrong, we are right. It makes you mistake tribe for truth and ideology for identity. And soon you are no longer defending wisdom, you are defending yourself. You cannot see the person in front of you anymore. You can only see the enemy. Every age has its holy wars, not always fought with swords, but always fought with certainty. The Middle Ages burned heretics. Today we cancel them. The language has changed, but the spirit is the same. We no longer build altars. We build algorithms that feed us only what we already believe. We no longer crucify bodies. We crucify reputations. We no longer shout blasphemy. We shout misinformation. Different words, same fire. Blind belief turns wisdom into weaponry. It builds echo chambers that sound like community but are really cages. It gives people the illusion of belonging while robbing them of perspective. You stop seeking truth. You start collecting confirmations. And slowly the soul becomes deaf to the possibility that it might still be wrong. But humility is the antidote. True faith, true philosophy, true science all begin with the same posture. Open hands, not clenched fists. They say, teach me. They ask, what if I'm mistaken? They kneel not before dogma, but before the vastness of mystery. Because the moment you think you've captured truth, you've already lost sight of it. Truth cannot be owned. It can only be pursued. It is not a flag to wave, but a flame to tend. And a flame must breathe, or it dies. C.S. Lewis also said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. That is what belief was meant to be, a lens, not a weapon, something that helps you see more, not less. So many people claim to stand for truth, yet few are willing to sit with it in silence, because truth has a strange way of dismantling the ego. It shows you not only what is right with the world, but what is wrong within you. And most people would rather be certain than honest. They'd rather be righteous than real. The game of belief thrives on fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being alone, fear of uncertainty. But the fearless mind doesn't need certainty. It lives in the light of curiosity. It knows that the more it learns, the less it truly knows. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. So how do you win this game? You stop trying to win. You let truth transform you. Instead of defending it, you let questions deepen your faith instead of threatening it. You learn to say, I don't know, not as surrender, but as reverence. You begin to see that the purpose of belief is not to end wonder, but to sustain it. When you believe with humility, faith becomes freedom, not violence. It stops being a war and becomes a walk. You no longer seek to conquer others with what you know. You seek to illuminate them with what you've discovered. You no longer worship being right. You worship being real. And that is when the fifth game ends. The noise of ideology fades, and what remains is a silence so vast it humbles you. You no longer stand above others, you stand beside them. You no longer say, I have the truth. You whisper, I am learning to see. And for the first time, belief becomes what it was always meant to be, not the prison of the mind, but the light of the soul. This game has no screen, no audience, no applause. It plays out in silence, in the unseen corners of the heart. It begins when you first look into the mirror and realize that the enemy you've been fighting all along is wearing your own face. Every war, every cruelty, every betrayal that ever scarred the earth began here in the unhealed territories of a single mind. Before there was a sword, there was a thought. Before there was oppression, there was insecurity. Before there was hatred, there was self-contempt. Humanity's outer violence has always been a reflection of its inner fracture. We spend our lives trying to conquer the world. Yet the world is only a shadow cast by our unresolved selves. We chase success because we cannot face insignificance. We cling to control because we fear collapse. We drown in noise because we cannot endure our own silence. We crave desire because we've forgotten how to feel enough. We worship belief because we are terrified of mystery. And so, generation after generation, we keep playing, not realizing that the controller was never in our hands, but in our wounds. The final game is the confrontation with those wounds, the decision to stop running and finally look inward. It is not glamorous. It does not trend. There are no medals for self-awareness, but it is the only victory that changes everything else. You will resist it at first. You will call it too painful, too heavy, too slow. You will distract yourself with goals and noise, hoping to skip the level entirely. But the soul is patient. It will wait. It will whisper through insomnia, through heartbreak, through the quiet ache of success that still doesn't satisfy, until one day you finally stop fighting and listen. That moment, that still trembling moment, is the beginning of transformation. You realize that you have been both the prisoner and the guard, the player and the program. You were never being trained for violence. You were being trained for awakening. The very pains that once enslaved you become your teachers. Your failures, your loneliness, your fears, they all kneel before you and say, we were never your enemies. We were your initiation. Forgiveness is the key that ends the final game. But forgiveness is not weakness. It is the highest form of power. It's the act of releasing yourself from the past, of refusing to let bitterness dictate your future. It's understanding that no one can truly hurt you anymore because you no longer live inside their shadow. You've stepped into light. See, as Lewis once wrote, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. But even beyond religion, the truth stands. Forgiveness is not about excusing others. It's about freeing yourself from the gravity of pain. It is the act of choosing peace when every instinct demands war. The violence within the soul ends not through victory, but through surrender. Surrender to the truth that you are already whole, that you have nothing left to prove. You do not need to dominate life. You only need to live it fully. You do not need to silence the darkness. You only need to bring it into light. When you finally do, you will realize that there was never a game at all, only lessons disguised as battles, only mirrors disguised as enemies. And then something extraordinary happens. The need to compare disappears. The craving to control dissolves. The noise fades into quiet. The hunger transforms into gratitude. The rigid beliefs melt into wonder. The war inside you ends, and the world outside begins to heal in response. Because as within, so without. The peace you cultivate inside yourself becomes the peace that echoes through creation. The child who once learned violence from the world becomes the adult who teaches peace to it. The player who was once trained by illusion becomes the teacher of truth. The soul that once sought to escape the game finally becomes the architect of a new one, a game built not on fear, but on freedom. And when you reach that point, you will see life as it truly is, not a battlefield, but a classroom, not a punishment, but a pilgrimage. Every wound, every loss, every heartbreak becomes a lesson in love. Every challenge becomes a chance to practice peace. Every day becomes a new level in the art of being human. When you understand that, there is no violence left, only awareness, only compassion, only truth. And that is where all the games end, not in defeat, but in awakening. The controller falls from your hands, the screen fades to white, and for the first time, you are not playing anymore. You are simply being alive, awake, free,